Two public hearings tonight. Start with a public hearing regarding a zone change request. Henry, I'll let you introduce this, if we can give a staff report. Great.
David Russa has applied to the town to have his property on 804 West Bridge Avenue, which is between 8th and 9th, to be rezoned from retail business to residential. For the purpose of being able to put a home on it. Currently, the use is around it, it's surrounded by residential, and there is also a private shop to the east of it. Property is 7,200 square feet, currently zoned retail business, not on the floodplain, it's not a wetland, not a historical site. The property will have access to the town of Saratoga water and sewer system. It'll have direct access to power. It has access to the lot from West Bridge Avenue. So the development is not in conflict with the airport.
Can you stop on 13 where it says surrounding uses? When I read uses, I mean, like, what are the uses defined by the land use map? And I think you've listed uses as in how are they currently being used?
Right.
So I don't know.
So if we look at
Your definition of uses.
so my definition of use is what is on the property right
How
now,
it's currently.
so we can see if they're combative, right?
So I feel like it's safe to emphasize, or maybe should be emphasized, that even though those are listed as residential, all except for the north lot. There's residential surrounding it, but those are all non-conforming residential.
Right, as shown on the map,
Because they are zoned as retail business.
right, which
But
is,
that should be emphasized.
yeah, on the diagram before you can see what McCall's talking about. So there are lots around the proposed area that are being used as residential, but they are zoned retail business.
They currently work as residential before
Prior to the
this being
zoning,
zoned.
right, correct. And the public hearings were posted July 25th and August 1st in the Saratoga Sun. Did the on-site notice on July 26th, so we posted everything like we're supposed to. The signature sheet on 19 shows a list of everybody within 300 feet and their response. When we go into the public hearing, we'll record testimony on the application.
Henry, on number 14,
Yes,
the development. Not conflict with the operation. What is the development?
so if we move it to retail business, what they're proposing is not gonna affect the airport. It's kind of a blanket, like they put a house in there, it's not gonna hurt the airport. It's kind of a blanket statement.
Very good.
Questions?
So I have, I guess my question is. When I looked up the retail business, it looked like you could put a house on that.
No, it's
No,
only
not
resident,
all.
only residential uses are allowed.
Allowed if it's accessory.
Okay.
Or if you had a residential use that existed prior. So if you have a house on there currently, that's allowed, but you can't build a new one.
Okay, gotcha.
Does anyone else have questions for Emery before we? Okay, so we have David, is it Russa?
Yeah.
You wanna just introduce yourself and tell us about project here?
Real simple, just change it from commercial to residential. Most of the area around it is all residential to begin with. So it's small.
Did you buy the property with the intent of making it residential, or you just bought the property?
So I bought it from Arizona, obviously alone, and then I realized a lot of things were wrong with this. I'm trying to change it now. I didn't realize that it's sewer and water already, that people already in it. I didn't realize that. So I was trying to
So was your intent initially to make it a business and then you
go
changed your mind?
residential.
Okay, and just to recheck the zoning before you purchase.
Yeah, it was like, it was kind of fuzzy. So now that I got it, I'm like, oh, that is retail, so now. Okay, it's time to switch it to retail to residential or sell it. Or put it back in the market.
Anyone have questions for you?
So RV 7200 is single family homes only.
Yes.
No businesses allowed. And so my question was, you're giving up all of these things that you can do except for having the residence on there. And that is what your intention is, just to have a single family home.
Yep.
No business attached.
Correct.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Bought it for the purpose of a residential house on it, though it was zoned. You didn't know how it was zoned?
So the realtor wasn't really clear when I bought it.
The
When they're
realtor wasn't very clear.
on the disclosure. So
Title say anything? Fine. You didn't know the zoning. Purchased it. Purchased it blind.
It was vague. I just saw it up here. I was like, well, let's buy it, and figure it out from there. And if I can't put a house on there, I'll just sell it. That was my intention.
And there is some residential around it,
Non-conforming.
non-conforming that was there before.
Right. The neighbor
It
told me
became
about-
HB or business,
Retail business.
retail business, I should say.
Was it residential before? Because there was a house there before.
I mean, at some point, it must have been residential because there were houses there, so whether that's before zoning existed. Or. It was zoned residential.
Let's take the public testimony before, and then we can do this on the agenda part of it, so we don't start.
Any other questions for? Is there any public comment regarding the zone change? Okay, thank you.
Actually, what section, where is it?
It's on Bridge Street, was it
Eight.
9th Street on Bridge
5900.
or South Roof.
804 West Bridge.
Yes,
Is it your intention to build a house to live in or as a spec home?
Living. I was gonna hire Randy. He's supposed, he's not here tonight, but. he's a builder.
Raymer,
Raymer.
Gee,
okay, well, if there's no other public comment, I'll go ahead and close this public hearing. And then we'll discuss this further in our, inside our general meetings. We have another public hearing next.
Thank you.
Okay, I will open up our second public hearing. The Planning and Zoning Commission is looking for feedback from the community regarding regulating short-term rentals in Saratoga. We are going to, we have one written statement. I'll let Emery introduce that, and then I would ask anyone who has comments, please come up to the podium and share your comments or concerns constructively in less than 3 minutes. And please state your names clearly. And I would like to also encourage, if somebody has already stepped up and said the same thing as you, feel free to step up and say that same thing, because we are trying to get a feel for how many people have concerns. So if a lot of people have the same concern, that is just as important as one person facing that concern. And then the planning commission may have a question for you specifically, but otherwise we will withhold our discussion again until our general meeting. So that being said, Emery, if you would like to share, we've received one letter. We'll start with the written correspondence.
Try to read this in under 3 minutes. This letter is from Dave Gloss and Susan March. And this came to us on August 7th, 2024. We would like to provide feedback, questions, and comments to consider on short-term rentals within the town of Saratoga, Wyoming. Thank you for hosting a public hearing on the topic on August 13th. Unfortunately, we will not be able to attend as we will be out of town. We're not heading to college. We found we had both extra space and the need for additional income to help pay educational expenses. We have managed a portion of our home/property located in Country Club Heights Addition subdivision as a short-term rental since 2018. Our short-term rental does not have a kitchen, and therefore we feel the space is not conducive for a long-term rental. On average, we host guests 151 nights per year and have paid $674 per year in lodging tax. Most of our guests stay 1 to 3 nights, but we have also occasionally hosted guests for 1 to 3 months. We've hosted guests from close as Rollins and as far away as South Korea. People stay at our place while on vacation, visiting family, participating in one of Saratoga's events, fishing derby, or working in the Platte Valley. To our knowledge, there have not been any informal or formal complaints, issues, or concerns with our operation of a short-term rental. The opportunity to utilize our space as a short-term rental has been fun, rewarding, and also provided us with additional income, which we have used for a wide variety of purposes, including making improvements to our property. We feel that providing short-term rental has benefited our community by providing lodging for visitors and workers, contributing to lodging taxes, and contributing economically both from our guests spending money in the community and our spending money to maintain and improve our place. If the town of Saratoga chooses to consider managing or regulating short-term rentals in some fashion, we suggest the process and any outcome. Define short-term and long-term rentals, be driven by factual information, and be based on a robust assessment of existing and projected short-term and long-term housing and lodging needs. My question was, has there been an assessment of a housing and lodging in the community, including short-term and long-term rentals? Housing vacancy rates, current and projected availability, costs. C, focus on identifying and solving specific issues. What are the issues or problems the community is trying to solve? Are they real or perceived? Consider and not duplicate existing policies, regulations, and or laws. Are there existing policies, regulations, laws to address any issues, problems, and or could they be better applied? For example, if there is a nuisance or safety concern, noise or building condition, those concerns could be broadly applicable to short-term and long-term rentals, residential living, etc. And may be addressed through existing policies, regulations, and or laws. Do short-term rentals require a special use permit through existing policies and regulations? If so, this was not clear to us, and perhaps simply providing guidance and information on existing policies and regulations as they apply to short-term rentals would be beneficial. Consider the likelihood of achieving the desired outcome. Would that outcome would solve the issue or the problem? Consider alternatives to address any issues or problems. Are there incentives to address any issues or problems that may be more effective to achieve the desired outcome? For example, if there are existing policies or regulations that are limiting the development of low-cost, short and long-term housing in the community, could those be modified to encourage that type of development? Are there market-driven solutions that will achieve the desired outcome? The housing, rental, and short-term lodging needs in the community are dynamic and complex, but we have observed the community adjusting to those needs over time. For example, numerous entities have constructed living quarters for their employees, the Old Baldy Club, Saratoga Hot Springs Resort, Brush Creek Ranch, and the Forest Service. This helps us to meet their needs and also reduce the demand for those employees seeking other housing in the community. Medicine Waters has expanded to provide additional rental opportunities in the community. Housing developments, Octagon Estates, Saratoga Overlook have and continue to construct, providing additional housing opportunities. Riviera Motor Lodge has expanded to provide additional lodging in the community. G, consider the costs and staffing associated with administration and enforcement of any new policies or regulations. Is it realistic for the Saratoga Planning Commission members and or Saratoga employees to administer and enforce existing and new policies and regulations? Provide fair and equitable treatment for short-term rentals as compared to long-term rentals and other businesses. We are concerned that short-term rentals may be singled out and treated differently without a justifiable reason. For example, if a permanent fee inspection system is developed, please consider whether the issues being addressed by those regulations should also be applied to long-term rentals or other businesses. Consider both the benefit as well as the drawbacks. Consider distinguishing between different types of short-term rentals. For example, distinguish between the rental of the entire property, typically host/owner not on premise, versus a portion of the property, portion of home, typically host/owner on premise. Engage a broad spectrum of community members throughout the process. For example, making a concerted effort to directly reach out to the short-term rental owner operators, long-term rental owners, motels, local housing contractors could provide a wide range of diverse ideas and improve any outcome. Challenge for any public process is to understand and balance the opinions of the silent majority versus the outspoken few. We desire to be good neighbors and to comply with all policies, regulations, and laws while managing a portion of our property as a short-term rental. We appreciate the time and effort that the Saratoga Planning Commission and Saratoga Town Council members have put into short-term rentals to feel that a robust community discussion related to the broader lodging and housing needs for our community will continue to make Saratoga a great place to live.
Thanks, Emery. Okay, so I guess the podium is open, and I don't know if you want to raise your hand or just step up, or Josh, you can handle it first.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
Are you representing the newspaper or are you representing an open
I was just about ready to get at that point, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
That's good. Does my introduction count as part of my 3 minutes?
How long's the introduction?
To answer Mayor Davis's question, I am standing up here both as a member of the public as well as the manager of a business in the area.
So which hat do you have on right now?
Both, my head's big enough. All right. Just coming from the manager of so first of all, my name is Joshua Wood. I live in Saratoga. I'm the operations director for Stevenson Newspapers, which owns the Saratoga Sun, an employer in the area. So I'm coming to you to speak as both a resident as well as the manager of a business. From the business perspective, I will say that it has been difficult, as with most other businesses, over the past couple of years to recruit and retain employees. And part of that is because, with interviewing people who live elsewhere, they get excited to come to Saratoga, everything else, and it's like, hey, look at the housing prices, and then it's pretty much a firm no, as well as trying to look for rentals. Now, I know I've had quite a bit of soapbox for the past couple of years on short-term rentals. And so coming from a residence, the perspective of a resident, being someone who was lucky enough to buy my house before the pandemic hit and housing prices went through the roof. It feels, and I know I'm using feeling instead of fact, however, because we don't have firm numbers on exactly how many short-term rentals are operating within the Saratoga community and within the municipal limits, not the Saratoga area, which includes Walcott down to halfway to Encampment. It's hard to see where we might stand on this. And so part of the reason I think it's important to have a process for this, an ordinance for this, is so the Department of Public Works, the Planning and Zoning can have an idea of how short-term rentals are in fact affecting. So when people say, hey, short-term rentals are the reason we don't have long-term rentals and the reason it's so hard for businesses to find people to move here, there's then empirical data to say, well, actually, we have this many houses versus this many short-term rentals, which is so much percentage of the houses available. It all comes down to a fact finding, right? And so I think that's an important aspect. Now with my 40 seconds left, I do believe that if we do go through the process of short-term rental ordinance, that it really, it does need to be balanced out between short-term rental and long-term rental, et cetera, and really need to, what is in the best interest of Saratoga and the town of Saratoga. Obviously, if there's any sort of permit process, stuff like that, it's going to mean extra work. So that's where any potential fee comes in as to, would these fees be able to help pay for additional staff to look at short-term rental issues? So, and with that 3 minutes, I am done.
Excellent.
Good job.
My name is Kenneth R. Walters. I'm a resident of the town and a business owner. Is there anyone in this room who doesn't believe that this is the largest, most contentious meeting you're going to have in 2024? You just look around. You don't get this. Why is the town attorney not here? There's going to be a lot of legal issues. I don't understand why we're paying somebody to be an attorney who evidently just works for the mayor.
You want an answer to
Yeah, I
that?
want an answer.
Because I did not invite her, sir.
Well, that's stupid. I mean, this is the biggest meeting, most contentious meeting of the year. Why wouldn't she be here?
She has made her ruling. It has been brought back to this committee. The end of story.
So there's no point in this
Keep it
meeting.
constructive. Your comment that you would like to see the lawyer here is heard.
Okay, but the point is, it's up to you to invite her. Is that the way, is that how this is organized?
Hey, that,
Please.
it has nothing to do with what we're discussing here. The attorney's not here because she was not asked to be present.
Well, if it's already determined, why are we having a meeting? If it's already determined what you're gonna do, why are we having a meeting?
Because it was never voted on.
We're
They
here
asked to
get
bring it
feedback
back
from
up.
The public to help the planning commission decide what steps we take forward on regulating short-term rentals.
Well, you
You have another-
understand, I believe
You're
the town attorney should be here.
heard. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Antoinette Leone, and I own the River Cottages and the Old Fly Shop. I have nightly rentals. I'm also a resident here.
Excuse me, could you spell your name for me, please, the last name?
Cleoni. And I've lived in this town and I understand that personally, I agree with the letter that was written and that Emery read. I provide short-term rental, I have a long-term rental property, and I also have offered people, like 5-6 months rental as well for the property. So I feel as a property owner that I am flexible in terms of how I use the properties. I also know that I'm also zoned to do what I'm doing, so I don't know how much the regulation will affect my business. But I find that even in the last couple of years, I know people who've had nightly rentals and have taken them off the market. So that there's constant ebb and flow in terms of what is available and what isn't available for long-term rental. I think that defining, like if I do feel a little strongly about people who buy property in town as investment and then not live here and use it as nightly rental, or from what I understand, sometimes it's left on the market, not rented at all until they turn it over. So I don't know how those issues can be addressed and as part of our problem of people coming in and buying investment property and not really investing in Saratoga. But I do pay my property taxes, but also the sales tax that applies to rentals for all my properties. So I direct the people who come visit to our local restaurants and shops to go and spend money. I mean, so it's how do we find the balance in terms of meeting the needs of a tourist town that also has the needs of having employees? I know it's hard if you're looking for seasonal employees to come to Saratoga and not have housing. But I have seen a lot of the people that live here permanently or have decided to work here and live here have not really had a big issue of finding housing. So that's that. So do we need regulation? I don't really feel we do. I think property owners should have the right to do what they want, but I do have issues when investors come in and tie up the properties and it's not for the benefit of the town.
Spring Soul.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Stephen Patrick. I've been in this town since 1976, and we live in this town for a reason, because it's a good, safe community for our children. I live at 205 West Hickory Street, and there's a Airbnb right across the street from me at 206. We live here for a reason, because it's a safe place for our children to be. They can walk down the city streets and there's nothing to be. And so on any given day, I never know who's across the street from my house now. And so therefore, there's evil people in this world. And so my grandchildren are not allowed to play outside in front of my house anymore because of their safety. You never know. And I can't trust it. And I just feel like as if, I don't know, So I'm voicing my opinion as far as a safety issue. I don't care about your money. It's safety for me. I can't let my grandchildren go play anymore. Not out front, because I never know who's there. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Thanks for the opportunity to provide comment. I'm John Evans and I'm part owner along with my sister Kathleen Martin, Kelly and Dave Crispin of Riviera Motor Lodge. And I'm sure I could be accused of not wanting short-term rentals because they compete, but it's actually not true because I'm an advocate of tourism. I think we compete quite well. And part of the reason I'm an advocate for tourism is because it provides jobs, it provides a tax base and a quality of life as well. So for example, restaurant might not be here if there wasn't tourism. Fellows might not be here, there might not be the same kind of activities and stuff. I also feel it's a double-edged sword in that while tourism is good, too much tourism or tourism run amok can be too much. And I actually live in Eagle, Colorado, and in our valley, that certainly has happened where the employee base gets pushed further and further down valley and further away. So I've actually live in Eagle, like in Ford there. And you see that in Steamboat, and you see where they live in Driggs, Idaho, and so on. So my concern is that there is a balance between enough tourism and provides job and a tax base and too much tourism, which affects the quality of life negatively and creates a lot of competition for real estate and real estate pricing and forces people who want to live here out of town. So what I could envision, if I thought about it, would be that the folks who work here live in Hannah or Rollins. They don't want to live in Hannah or Rollins, they want to live here. So that concerns me. Then what happens in that instance, a lot of times, and certainly in the Vail areas, you end up with seasonal employees with J1 visas or H2B visas, and the cost to those businesses to attract employees and house them is truly astronomical. All of a sudden, hamburgers are extraordinarily expensive, everything is extraordinarily expensive. So I'd like to see a sense of balance come through this, where you just can't have tourism run amok, but you can actually have good quality of life, good jobs, and so on. So my suggestion, I guess, would want to be is to figure out what you want to be. Do you want to be a tourism mecca, or do you just want to be a little tamer version? Tourism, and by the way, tourism has always been here. When the Indians were here in the hot springs in the 1800s, they were tourists as well. Another suggestion we learned from others. Other people have faced this issue for years and years and years, and have struggled with what to do with it. One of the things that I thought sort of made sense was in Crested Butte, Colorado. They sort of said, well, we don't want to have town to be an endless stream of short-term rentals. We'd like a balance. So, and we also understand property rights are an issue, right? So they said, okay, we know the number of short-term rentals today. We'll issue that many short-term rental licenses, and not one more. And if someone releases theirs, then we'll grant another one. But that's the number that we're going to do. How that's worked, I don't know exactly.
Final remarks.
The other thing, I just want to mention that with motels, there's a level playing field in that, okay, life safety is an issue. You know, are there smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors? Does everyone pay taxes appropriately? It's a level playing field with commercial businesses.
I do have a question regarding hotels. So when you open or register your hotel with the state, is all of those, like the fire marshal, EPA compliance, is that something that they then take care of? How does the human safety aspect?
Well, the town does an inspection.
Right. Oh, the town does an inspection?
For fire.
I thought that was the fire marshal.
To be a fire marshal.
If I might reiterate from the general manager, yes, the fire marshal comes and he must do checks once a year. We also have fire extinguishers checked every 6 months.
And is that something you guys instigate? Like you have to remind the fire marshal to come, so do they just know that you?
We have to do it for safety. We have to make sure everything is in. Yeah, and make sure nothing is over painted, so the sensors flow from the sprinklers. You have to make sure that everything.
I was just curious, who enforces that or who monitors? that?
State,
So it's the
fire
state.
marshal. It's their responsibility that the state puts it.
So you reach out to the state and say, I'm opening a hotel. And then they contact the fire marshal and say, these people need to be on your radar.
The motel has to be in compliance every year.
So do they inspect once a year?
Yeah.
Right.
They come over and inspect once a year.
Yeah.
That's what she was getting at.
Yeah, so we bought an existing facility, how it would work for a new property. Sure, through zoning process.
I don't know how you open a hotel and that is different than any other regulations.
So Kim, that's required by the state then. They come,
Yes.
it's calendar all the time.
Yes.
You don't call them, it's required.
Well, if you see anything out of compliance, we have to call them and make sure it's safe.
But they do an inspection yearly.
I just had all
Yeah.
the fire extinguishers came through, yes, correct.
Well, and the fire extinguisher portion falls on the business owner.
It's different.
The state fire marshal, and it's the same with the health inspector if you have a restaurant. They will come in and usually it's not very much notification, hey, we'll be there tomorrow, we're gonna come to our
Right.
inspection. We have to make sure we are in compliance as a
Yes.
commercial property with, we have to pay for. All of our fire safety equipment has to be regularly inspected every 6 months, and that comes out of our own pocket.
Yes.
Cleaning of the hoods, all of that sort of fire sort of stuff, other than the inspection that is mandated by the state.
Thank you for that. Any other comments? Mr. Cooley.
Can I jump in front?
Jimmy.
Arm wrestle.
You know, you were so surprised, Jimmy.
Ladies and gentlemen of the council, good evening.
Ready to start your timer, go.
And go. First of all, I am all for tourism, no doubt about it. I believe that our.
State your name, please.
I'm sorry, my name is James Campbell. I've been a resident for 30 years here.
Thank you.
I'm all for short-term rentals, but as we talked about in a previous meeting, the Wyoming Impact Housing Plan shows us at 4.9% on short-term rentals, which is getting into our concern. I believe that short-term rentals, with or without a permit system, are a commercial business and should be paying commercial sewer and water. I also believe that, like everybody's talking about fire suppression, the only way we're gonna know that these houses have them is with a permit system that we can issue them a permit to place on their house. So you know that you are in compliance with all of the above that we decide. I think that's about it. I just, we need some sort of regulation. I would like you guys to be able to provide me with public information on every short-term rental, the company that owns it, the business name and their tax ID number. Because we have to know if they're registered. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
No, this is not conversation.
Oh, come on.
We'll never get through this.
We're not allowed, I thought we were allowed that.
When we're done taking testimony, you guys can discuss if you have a question or whatever.
My apology. All right, next comment, Mr. Cooley.
Hi, I'm Mike Cooley. I'm a 50-year resident here, and I'd just like to point out that Airbnbs are just the low-hanging fruit here. That's the easy thing to pick on. That's what everybody's doing. But you look at all the people here that are here for 2 weeks to maybe the whole summer, and they have second homes other places. They leave here. Those houses are not available. And in my instance, like I bought the 2 lots next to me. One had a house, one had a mobile home. I demolished them, took them off, just so I can have the lots, but I could have been a slum lord, I guess, and rented them, but I didn't want to do that. And the two places next to me, the one right next to it, they rented theirs, Randy and Trudy, to a guy, and it was a beautiful little place. I mean, I almost bought it. And they got a renter, one guy, and he completely destroyed it in less than a year. They've had to gut the entire thing and start over. They also bought the one right next to it, which is occupied now. But they said just as soon as that one is empty, they're not renting it anymore, keeping them both for family and friends. But this, yeah, then there's so many places in town tied up in probate that could be for sale or for rent or something. There's just a lot of different things. It's not just Airbnbs that it's doing. There's a lot of factors in there. People aren't looking at that. Like I say, the Airbnbs are the low hanging fruit. That's easy to grab at. But you need to look at, and I kind of agree with John about, we're strangling ourselves with tourism. You know, that for 10 years, more tourists, we need more tourists. Well, they come here several summers in a row, they retire. You mentioned yourself, McCall, about we're becoming a retirement community. Well, they buy a second home here and we're right back in the same boat. They have another home. Somewhere else, they don't want to stay here all winter. But you need to look at all these things. It's not just Airbnbs. And eventually, the free market supply and demand will take care of some of the Airbnbs. They'll put them up for sale, make long-term rentals out of them, and things like that, you know, that there's getting to be so many that they all can't survive. So it's free market supply and demand. It'll work. You'll see a change. Might take a couple years, but you'll see a change. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Public comment? Ms. Beck? Councilwoman Ms.
Hi, Kathy Beck, community member. I appreciated what Dave and Susan mentioned in their letter that in order to level the playing field and inform the community, I think we need to be clear and concise about the statistics that we're looking at, the 4.9% that Jimmy mentioned. And I agree with what Jimmy had to say too, from a business point of view, our hotel and those folks dealing with lodging. Although it's a private setting, there is an overall compliance. Those who are involved with Airbnb and VRBO, they have their own compliance program that they follow. And they answer for those types of concerns that we have for those commercial buildings as well. So I think a fair start would be to be clear on what are the facts. What do we have registered? Who do we have renting out on what level and how often, so that we have a true representation of the statistics for our community. And I am interested in, and I'd like maybe for us to share if we could, what is our current ordinance and how does it address these concerns that are coming up? Does something need to be addressed? Do we need to be more specific in how those ordinances are worded so that we have a better understanding and we have a clear path forward? So do we have a general statement that the attorney has come back and said, do nothing or stick with the status quo? And I'd like to have an explanation of why we would stick with the status quo and what that involves in the ordinance. So if we could get a summary, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Would it be possible to make one more statement?
Does anybody else have a statement? I'll give someone else. There's no one else then.
Save the rest of my time to you, Josh. Jason Campbell, I help manage and run a business here in town. And Mr. Cooley brought up the supply and demand thing. And I think that that's an important idea when we have an unknown number of short-term rentals on the market. The supply is drastically decreased. We can't hire people. Sure that there are people in this room who have noticed that we've had to just close on a random day because if somebody gets sick, I can't operate. So my wife and I were speaking to Mr. Jennings, the superintendent of the school recently, a week or two ago. There was a teacher that was hired last year who couldn't move here because they couldn't find a place to live. In his office on the wall, there's things for potential teachers or potential employees. And almost every one of the rentals were monthly rentals for $2,000 a month. Which I don't know what the going rental rates are. We do have a rental here in town that we have a long-term agreement with to be able to provide for an employee. And that's an additional cost on me. I have to pay that because I don't have enough people. So I think that it is a difficult problem. There's a lot of different angles to it. What Mr. Patrick was saying, we've also seen near our neighborhood, there are some short-term sort of rentals back there. And sometimes it's a house and there'll be 10 or 12 vehicles out there clogging the road up and parked everywhere. Mr. Portia's probably seen that because we live in a proximity to one another. So, traffic congestion and lots of people about, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you couldn't park 12 vehicles in front of your house with probably not getting a call from the council. So I know from a recent council meeting, there were some comments that businesses aren't being affected. Ours was down 15% last year because I have to close 2 days a week because I don't have enough people. So, and I can tell you on a business with very tight margins, 15%, it puts you kind of close to negative territory. So, and we all know that the price of goods and services are not getting cheaper. So when those margins shrink even more, and I'm limited to 5 days a week. I mean, I don't know how many people come downtown on Mondays and Sundays, but it's a ghost town. I wish we could open on Mondays. I can't because I don't have, we used to be open 7 days a week. Can't do that any longer because I cannot get the people. So I don't know what the answer is, but from a business perspective, I would say that there needs to be some sort of ordinance that helps us take control of our short-term rental situation. I'm down at the business on Monday and I get people all the time, well, how come you're not open? Well, I can't be. The amount of traffic downtown with all the storefronts that are closed is quite remarkable. So yes, people are coming to town, people are staying in town, people are spending money, but there's a lot of opportunities there that are not being taken advantage of because there are some closures on various days of the week. So anyway, thank you for your time. Sorry, Josh.
I'm actually gonna go before Josh. So I'm Caitlin Campbell. I'm also working at the Sun. So we actually did an article that got into a little bit of the statistics with short-term rentals. So I was just going to share those to give a little bit of perspective there. So the short-term rentals that we found were over a 2-day period. So this is not representative of every short-term rental in Saratoga over the course of an entire year, because this were the ones we found in a 2-day period that we were able to locate and verify. So with the short-term rentals, we found the people who own the property, whose address was listed in Saratoga, were 12 out of 29. The most common year that the deed was listed for the house was 2022, and there were 12 property owners who had 2 or less years listed hosting on Airbnb in Verbo, where we got this information from. There were 4 people with 3 to 4 years hosting, and then 9 people with over 4 years hosting. So that means that there were about 43% of the people we saw owning Airbnbs, Saratoga, did not have their address listed as living in Saratoga, and they had purchased the property within the past 2 years. That's about it.
3% live in Saratoga and they purchased the property.
No, sorry, 42% live in Saratoga, so 57% does not live in Saratoga.
Okay, 41% live there and purchased within the last 2 years. Purchased within the last 2 years.
The number of people who purchased in the past 2 years were 48%.
And 57% of them are out of town.
outside.
How many are out of state? Just curious.
I don't think that I listed the statistics for out of state, but there were quite a few individuals from out of state. The majority were from Wyoming.
What's the total number?
We found 29 Airbnbs that we were able to verify.
Okay. Any other public comment?
But yeah, and and then I'll also say that the zoning, the most common zoning was RD 6,000, but then there were also zones in RD 7200, RD 9,000, and residential business.
I was just curious, do you know how many Airbnbs are here?
No, I don't know anymore.
Last fall, AirDNA said there was 69.
I remember it's 120 now.
I don't know if that's
In the city.
is that the town or Carbon County?
That's.
That includes Ryan Forest, yeah.
Okay,
Ryan.
any other public comments?
Get one in the rear.
I remember a few years ago, we got a little piece of paper in the mail. My neighbors on the corner wanted to build an awning over the porch on my house. It had to be approved. So I'm not saying that they're a good thing or a bad thing, but some sort of awareness, some sort of approvals, should they not have to go through the community and ask if do we approve of this? Because I can guarantee you, if I was asked, and I think most of us, if we were asked, we would not approve that. So how is it that they have to be approved to build a porch, but they can slip these in under the belt like that?
Any other comments, public comments? This is Josh, Cindy. Come on up, Cindy.
Cindy Booth. Specialize in tourism. So my question is, what is rent for a short-term rental that teachers cannot afford? And if you eliminated every Airbnb in town, would they be able to afford the rent at those properties?
Maybe to compare with what they make for short-term rentals. Is that what
If we have teachers that can't afford to move here for, I mean, is short-term 1 year,
Short terms,
but
29,
days,
29, 30 days.
30 days. So I guess I'm just trying to understand if the problem is really the Airbnbs or if it's more like Mr. Cooley said, if it's deeper. So I just don't know what rent is on average in Saratoga, Wyoming for a month.
My name is Nancy Jansa and I own a long-term rental apartment building. My rent is $1,000 a month and it includes all utilities, television, laundry, etc. So I'd love to talk to a teacher that needs a place because I have 2 units for rent right now.
Any other public comments? Right. Well, I guess, is there any specific questions from the council for regarding any of the public comment? We'll keep discussion till later, but you have a specific question.
Again, Jimmy, remember, there were certain stats that you came and brought. First, there was like 49, then 69, and now how many?
Like
And
I
it
said,
was
it's been
based
3
on-
months since I've been to a meeting, so I don't know what we got now. We were at 69, but I believe we're probably in 70s now.
Jimmy, last I heard was 72.
In town limits.
Yeah.
Are you sure those are all in the town limit?
What they say.
The study that the state came up with, I believe, was 69, correct? But it was with an area code of 82301,
So that includes Ryan Park, right?
which included Ryan Park, probably cleared it, almost to the Baggett Road. So
And they're just doing.
that is my question on that. Are the facts will really totally just
Right.
Okay, door to door, knock on them and find out.
That's right.
You don't have a registry.
Right.
No.
Okay,
Let's go to the doors, knock and find out.
All right, so if there is, I think we've concluded all of our public comments. I am gonna go ahead and close our public hearing. And go ahead and open our regular meeting at a time of 6:20. For your notes. If everyone would please join me for the pledge of allegiance. Give it a minute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right, let's see if you'll do roll call for us. All right.
Present.
Paul. Yeah. Here. Go down. Here. Done.
Here.
Here. Present. Okay. Does anyone have anything to add to the agenda of the meeting? Not gonna get a motion to approve the agenda for the evening. Motion. Second. I'll second. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, does anyone have anything to add to the minutes from our July 9th meeting and our special July 23rd meeting? Any errors or inconsistencies? Not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our July meetings.
Second.
I'll approve, I say maybe so moved. Your moves. Second,
Third.
all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. Any correspondences? Have any? I am for the public. Pretty yes. Oh, not Fox, it's not with me. Okay, new business. So we have a zone change request. From changing a retail business lot to residential. Question on this.
I'll go first. Concern about this particular is that as I look at the map, this would be a small block in that zoned area of residential. So we're changing a small piece. Do we want to break up that zone? That retail business zone? Is this something that we want to continue doing in the future? You know, looking at the property, who owns the property across the street? Is that us? Do we own that property?
We have some in there. Where Oxford has some.
Then there's the resident right across. Donnie Bennett.
Donnie.
Have a resident across the street from there. And two to the west. Two to the west, two to the west.
Directly across?
Pardon?
Directly across?
Maybe not 100% directly, a little bit of an angle. But kind of to the southwest, just a little bit of this property. You have a residence.
I will kind of mirror your concerns that it feels like we're making more of a non-conformity, even though the current use is residential, but it's non-conforming residential. And so I don't know why that strip was zoned retail business all the way up Bridge Street, but it was. And if we want it to be residential, then it seems like that whole zone should change, but it just feels like we're starting to spot zone residential within retail business. And that feels like we're creating more non-conformities than what our case does.
Comment, John. Is this not the existing problem in the town as far as there are areas that are out of zone, right? And that's what we face with because they have been sitting there out of zone forever.
Not conforming.
Right, not conforming, and there's no, direction to correct. I don't know how that would, even go, but. So when an individual gets a piece of property and he sees residential and he wants to build him a residential home. He assumes that he could do that when they can't, and comes and gets this. So I think it's difficult with these existing non-compliance zoned areas for us to start regulating and okay, denying or what have you. When in fact, they sit existing, it's kind of tough.
That would be like a question I would throw at you, what are the odds, what do you think the odds in the next 30 years that those lots have existing homes on them, get bought out, tore down, and get used into retail business? That would be, so maybe long-term in the next master plan update or something, if this is something you move forward with, maybe that is something we work in. Because that is a whole block of houses pretty much.
So yeah, and I don't know why they're initially zoned retail business, but they are retail business.
Right.
I feel like,
Tell you
sure.
historical knowledge.
Yes, we'll do.
I know why your hair is white for a reason. I'm Sue Jones, Chairman of the Carbon County Commission. Also served on the town council in 1983 for 8 years. And planning and zoning and airport and all that good stuff. So I'm historical knowledge. Bridge Street's an absolute disaster, and it's been for that long of a time. And it is spot zone central. And that's about the only way you can handle it. Because for some reason, when they started to zone, which was in the 1970s, early 1970s, I think they got a little confused and they were down in the lower end of town on Bridge Street, which truly was retail business. And they had this vision of going up the hill. And for years, when I sat on the town council, we spot zoned. And that's the biggest no-no in the world of planning and zoning, is spot zoning. But Bridge Street is a mess. You had construction businesses out there. Where Triple D is now has been a construction building contractor for years and years. Right next to this property was a trash business. Bob McCarter had his trash business in that property right next to it. So that's the way that we always handled it, historical knowledge.
Just
Bridge
below
Street
there
is
was
terrible.
also Swanson's well drilling business. That's why that whole block is taken up there.
And Stollins's, and it's kind of a mini industrial area. Bridge Street itself is pretty much the only one. That's really the only rec you got, planning and zoning. RD 6000s, that's anything goes zone. That's what we used to call it. It still is kind of that. There's different things, but Bridge Street is a unique creature, and it was messed up from the beginning. And I can tell you that historically, we spot zoned. And so you just go, oh man, you're not supposed to do that, but spot zone, and make sure that, it's close. You get out and you got Raymer Construction across the street from Triple D, you got the radio station, you got the hospital, you have a little bit of organization to it. Where this is at, you're right next to residential. You're across the street from residential. So it's spot zone central, just historical knowledge.
Does anyone else have discussion on this?
So I have another question. So in terms of our retail business, we have no opportunity then for people to live like in like above or?
I think that's accessory use.
Oh, that's.
So
accessory
as
use?
long as your
Okay.
primary use of the land is retail business, if the secondary use is residential, that is allowed for an accessory use
Okay.
on there.
Now,
So that allows for upstairs.
I have another question because one of the things that I struggle with is we talk about the lack of jobs here. And so I would wanna prevent us from. I don't know what percentage of Saratoga is business versus residential. You know, how much business we wanna have here, because I think that we want to make sure that we keep our land for business as well, so that people can have businesses here, so. I'm a little, do you know what that is, Emery? Like, what percentage of?
I don't have percentages, but I mean, and the town owns a lot of it. There's retail business all on the south side that's all of that Bridge Street that's bare, that is retail business. There's some highway business the town owns. Go ahead, Master.
I have a question for you, Emery.
Yes.
Looking at the map, how it's all, retail business, and we're gonna make a little indentation with zoning change for 7,200 square feet. That's the lot size, right?
Correct.
Is there a way this gentleman can file a variance or something and build a house in there so we don't have to do a zoning change? Something a little bit better, easier?
No, this, to me, I mean,
if it's, what I'm hearing is that we have to have a business before we can have a house. Okay, and then I see it, I'm appreciating the historical knowledge there, but is there an easier way we can get this done where it's just like, the guy wants to build a house, there's other houses there.
Right.
They're cutting this little thing out, okay, now, and opening up a can of worms. Maybe. I don't know.
I think it's zoning wise, like just throwing a variance and having, like taking a house and stuffing a house in retail business, to me, would be more of an.
Is it?
Incongruent procedural
Okay.
thing to me.
Very good.
And actually changing the zone and allowing the guy to be, because then you'd be forever non-conforming, right? If you put a house in retail business, it's not allowed, then you're in a non-conforming situation. He changes the zone, you put the single family in there, it's 100% conforming. It wouldn't be incompatible with the uses that would be there.
Very good.
And there's a lot of subjective latitude you guys have with this decision.
I agree kind of with what Donnie was saying, is that at some point you have to start enforcing the zoning to improve nonconformities. As Sue was saying, there's spot zoning all over the place. That's why you have residential next to shops, next to residential, next to private shops that aren't even business related. At some point, no one on this board made this zoning map. This zoning map has existed for 70 years, whenever they made the ordinances. It's just our job to enforce it. And so there was a reason why that was zoned retail business. And it feels like the intent is to clean up that strip for the purpose of retail business. If the community feels like that space up there should be residential, then I think that's a larger zoning map issue. And should be addressed on a larger scale instead of just spot zoning residential within the retail business. This feels like we're adding to the nonconformities up there instead of enforcing the zoning map.
No, and I long term, I 100% agree with that. But that's driven by, it's developers with a ton of money who can come buy a ton of property and change big strips of land into large developments. Like, how long is this gonna take for all those houses on that block to get torn down and become an actual retail business district? That lot's gonna sit empty for it's been empty for what, 10 plus years? The master plan says, let's look for opportunities to infill. This is, to me, an opportunity to infill. Subjective.
And there's also opportunities to infill in residential districts, not business districts. Any other discussion?
If you go east on that property, basically have a vacant lot that's full of this zone retail. Full of well drilling equipment. Then you hop right across that next street and you're into residential on both sides of the street, again, coming up the hill. Until you get to basically Corey Oxford's place, which is zoned retail business, and he has storage sheds there. And then you skip and then you have, which the town owns, and then now all of a sudden you have another residence, so. You know, that is a unique situation.
And west of that property, you've got 3 houses on the same side of the street. And like Emery said, looking long-term, 30 years. Minimum before you see those houses change ownership or come down to become a business.
But at some point, we have to start enforcing the land use map.
Question, comment. Yes, Johnny. So the application says it's for zone amendment. So say that's what they want, maybe because it's not zoned correctly. And that's the problem. We already talked about that. So just a zone amendment for an individual to put a house on there, you know, what alternative does he have, you know, I mean, he didn't know buying it that it wasn't zoned. So I feel the residents, you know, we gotta help our residents and we can help them by, the zones are wrong, you know, and it's not that individual's fault. You know, so we gotta help our residents with this process, you know, that's my opinion.
Is he a resident? He's from Arizona.
Well,
He would like to. Yeah, he wants to be. Yeah, he doesn't.
But I struggle, honestly, I struggle with a person buying a house and not knowing what the zone is and not knowing what they're able to do and how. Let the buyer beware, that's what we always hear, right?
I agree with
When
you.
people buy a house.
I agree with you on that.
I mean, it sounds to me like this is something maybe, I don't know. The person wants to have a house. And they wanna change the zone because they wanna have a house there. I just struggle with that. It's zoned retail business. There's a whole long thing for retail business.
And in defense of the person, he said he saw it listed online. So he looks, maybe sees the area, sees other houses in there, thinks there's a lot, I can buy this, contacts the realtor. Realtor is driven by a sale. They want that sale, sure. Are they gonna spiel out their guts on that? Because they're not gonna first say, did you understand this isn't where you can live? Probably not.
But that's illegal, isn't it, of the realtor? I mean, that's their job, is to disclose
Residential
all
lot.
information.
I mean, if you were to look at this map in 30 years and see this little weird little nub into resident or retail business, would you say, what were those people thinking? What happened to make that decision?
Or maybe you adjust that and get that whole residential block zone residential like it
Or
actually
you
is.
look at a bigger change in the zoning map,
Right.
which I agree. Which I'm not opposed to.
Or at some point,
second
would
here.
there be
Who's got a
businesses
comment?
there?
So according to the application and all the neighbors, there's like, 12 neighbors that say yes, and then the other half, they didn't respond. So it's 50-50. In terms of the people that are around, nobody seems to be, disagreeing with this. They seem to be supportive of it. And that's just my observation, that isn't it the neighbors that pretty much decide what's gonna happen next? Just like the chickens.
No, it's just a minimum requirement for signature petition. The zone change is entirely at your guys' discretion. Based off the comp plan and the map. Obviously, somebody want to come in there and put like an industrial operation there, you can say no.
I'm just honoring their
Right.
wishes.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I guess I would entertain a motion to,
Make a decision.
you have to vote, so I need a motion so we can vote on this, whether or not to to recommend the staff report for zone change. So I would accept a motion
Motion to vote.
to recommend.
A motion to recommend approval or denial of zoning application. It's right now.
You have to make it in the positive, right? So just motion for approval of this, and then we need to vote yea or nay.
Well, you guys can. Yeah, either way.
Okay.
Make a motion to approve or deny.
Second,
No.
You have to make that specific.
Yeah.
To either.
I make a motion that we vote whether to accept or deny the application for zone amendment.
the motion is say to approve the application, and then we
And if
vote.
everybody votes no,
Okay.
they deny it.
Okay.
A motion to approve the zone change.
Zone change.
Application, okay, we have a second. Any further discussion? No, Jodell? Any further discussion? All right, those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Nay.
I'm opposed.
Raise your hands, roll call if you're against.
Against, raise your hand.
I'll vote for. I'm sorry, I didn't say that.
Three, four.
Who's against, you and me?
And Chia. And Matt and Jodell and Johnny are for. So Chuck, I think you have to vote then for the tiebreaker.
Well, I'll vote yes to recommend it to go before the council. For approval.
Then it goes to the town.
They'll make the final.
Okay. Moving on, where's our agenda here? Okay, we, as a planning commission, received a draft of the transportation alternative master plan from OD, and we all had the opportunity to review it. That's what one of our special meetings is about in July. And we took our recommendations and applied them. And so this last week, we were able to look over the final draft. And we now just need to vote to recommend it to town council. Does anyone have anything to add to that discussion? The draft was good to everyone. They took our recommendations. From everything I saw, I was pleased. They made the recommendations that I pointed out. I don't know if everyone felt that way.
Felt like everything that was brought up was pretty much addressed for the most part. I agree.
So I would entertain a motion to recommend the Saratoga Transportation Alternative Master Plan to town council for official town adoption.
I so moved.
Second,
I'll second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Map updates. We have the 2016 comp plan recommended that we include open space in the zoning map, so that was something that we talked about in addition to the airport being zoned. We decided that was gonna be industrial or just airport zone.
I think we need to wait for them to finish their master plan, but we'll put it on the map. And then when they decide whatever that is, then we can plug that into Title 18.
So Emory kind of has a draft zoning map, updated zoning map right here. And I think the comments from the council was that they all wanted a copy themselves, so they could study it.
Okay, I'll get some printed out and you guys wouldn't mind picking them up when you have it.
And then in addition to that, well, we can continue that zoning map discussion. So that is a thing that's in the works.
I would just like to make one comment on the map. If you look at the legend, there's a lot of colors that are very similar, and we might want to think about making them a little bit more different so that if, when it's posted on the website, it's easier to identify.
That is something we're continuing to work on. All right, finally, long-awaited short-term rental discussion. For the commission, who has comments related to our discussion from the public hearing. Or our thoughts.
Well, yeah, go.
Yes, Gina.
So first of all, I want to thank Anne Marie and Chuck for sending me to the Western Planners Conference. It was so enlightening, and I have all kinds of data and information to share. There were not only there were 17 states in this West, and there were 7 states that were there real strong. And everyone, the common denominator for everything was workforce housing, short-term rental, affordable. There were towns like several, most of them were 5,000 people and under. One woman that I met, very impressed with, a city manager, town of 1,500 people, and her whole thing was historic downtown. And what do you do to generate revenue? They had, all of their revenue came from oil, gas, agriculture, so therefore they didn't have a lot of income coming in at the time. So for the past 2 years, she's been very creative with different grants, proactive. Bottom line, half of the people there, and one had, Crested Butte was there, and he was talking about, it used to be a hippie town, and now they've had to grandfather half of Crested Butte in, because no one wanted to provide any guardrails or any. So.
Are you talking about short-term rentals?
Short-term rentals, yeah, yes. I'm so excited, but anyway, so bottom line, that was pretty much that we all had the same challenge, and there were different remedies and different solutions to it. So it's like, well, there were certain states that were already, dealing with it. Utah, their state legislature was, it isn't like we're the only person that's having to deal with this. Everyone is. And it's just the willingness of being able to have the vision. Bottom line to all this, there was one guy who was the head of he was a fire battalion in Cheyenne, 1,200 square feet, it's like 8 battalions he was over. His presentation was, he had Sears up there, Craftsman and Daibar, told the whole story. And the bottom line was like, you don't want your town to be like Sears. There was a whole story, and there's data, but that's kind of the bottom line to what happened, and how we're all in the same boat, and people are willing to share remedies, and so, thanks.
My thoughts on short-term rentals is that they're a business. The state of Wyoming taxes them like hotels. In my mind, that is, they don't. They pay 4% lodging tax, hotels.
Institutional knowledge here.
You don't want to waste the opportunity that you have your legislative representative here, because part of this is his problem.
Exactly.
They pay 9.5% assessed value of the market value, the way the state of Wyoming does their property taxes. Replacement value, market value, inflation, and people coming here buying houses for really high prices is why all your property taxes are high. 9.5% is what commercial business also pays, and that's that all other category in the Wyoming Constitution. And you will see this constitutional amendment coming up to remove residential property from that all other category in the Constitution, so that rate 9.5 can be adjusted up or
This is
down.
just property tax, correct?
Yes, this is property tax. So an Airbnb and a commercial business is the same rate, and a residential property. It's
So I was referring to
9.5%.
lodging tax.
And the lodging tax, if they report it, if they're with a online or somebody that manages it, those companies pay it. There are several in town who do it themselves. And the way that we work in this world, and having chased sales tax around wind farms, most people don't know what they're supposed to do to collect revenue in the state of Wyoming. They have no idea. I had a woman from South Carolina ask me as a county commissioner what she should do with 2 Airbnbs, B&Bs that she has on the West Hill. You get with the Department of Revenue and you register so that you pay lodging tax. I'm not sure all of them are paying lodging.
So that's my point, whether or not they're not, the state of Wyoming views them as lodging institutions and they are taxed, just like the hotels
Yes,
are.
but it's their responsibility.
It's been written. So,
But the playing field is not fair, and that's what John's talking about. His motel pays in a commercial rate, which is 9.5% is property tax. Where he pays considerably more is all the fixtures within his hotel as personal property on his property tax. All the beds, all the fixtures, which your assessor could do with some tweaks in the legislature and the Department of Revenue. So that if you are strictly an Airbnb, then all the amenities, all the furniture, everything within that is taxed as personal property tax. On top of the property tax, the real estate itself.
Right.
And that would make the fair playing field that John's talking about.
so the point that I'm making, and that is up to state legislation to figure out how they're doing property tax, correct? That's not, or is it the county that does that?
No,
Who makes those rules?
that's what it is right now. They're paying
The state.
a residential rate. You can go pull up one of the Airbnbs, one of the ones that's literally, that's all they do is Airbnb here.
Mhm.
Their property tax rate is residential,
Right,
9.5%. They're paying the exact same rate as your house that you live in year round.
but my point is that they are being taxed a lodging tax. So in the state's view, they are taxed the lodging tax just like the hotels are. So in my mind, that distinguishes them from long-term rentals. So there's a difference between short-term rentals and long-term rentals. Because the state says you have to pay lodging tax because you are operating a lodging business. And so just like any other business that wants to operate in a residential district, they should do the special, in my mind, I feel like we don't even have to change the code. The code already exists that say if you wanted to do a special permit use, like renting a portion of your single family dwelling or operating a bed and breakfast inn, which short-term rentals could be either and both of those, then you have to do the special use permit, which is, it's all outlined, bring in front of the planning commission and get it approved. It's business. If it's not a business, any other business that's listed to be allowed in a residential district, like museums, churches, library, any of these businesses that provide resources to the residential community, if you're not one of those, then you have to go through the special use permit. Regardless of whether it affects affordable housing, whether it is, competition to hotels, whether or not they're safe or not, they're a business and they want to operate in residential. I don't think operating a business in residential is a private property right. That's why there is zoning. And so they should have to do what the code says and get a special use permit. We don't have to change the code.
You would need to have them furnish though, their registration with the Department of Revenue as a lodging.
Well, if to operate, as my understanding is to operate either through Airbnb or VRBO, they have to do that.
If you go through those places, pay, but if you're doing it on your own.
Right. Then you're
I
hoping that,
guarantee you that if you go out and look at short-term rentals, there's lots of them that aren't charging lodging tax. And I bet 90% of them don't know they're supposed to. Because I'm just renting this place, I don't have any idea what the rules and regs are.
right,
So you're gonna have,
so there could be better communication.
yes, better communication, and then you require documentation from the state so that the state regulations roll in with your regulations.
And then I think my other thought then is if we want to create some sort of permit process.
So come back.
Oh.
Go ahead, I interrupted.
Well, you called her back, ask her a question.
Well, I
My
just.
second point has nothing to do with Sue.
Well, I just wanted to make sure I understand what you said. You're saying that both commercial and individual property owners pay 9.5% on their property for their property tax. But the difference is that if I'm a commercial owner, now who does that evaluation? I guess the county. The assessor comes in and they look and they actually assess you on your assets. And that's included in that amount, still at 9.5%.
Right, of their market, well, personal property, what is the rate of that, personal property?
That's a different percentage.
It's higher, isn't it?
It's higher.
11.5.
And there's.
Well, that's no commercial, you're talking industrial like.
There's a cap on the dollar amount of what that personal property
Yeah, the
is,
personal,
Okay.
you know.
but that's the difference of John
Mhm.
and his motel. He's
has to
paying
pay
for the
for it.
land and the building and the value, which is gonna be way more than the house on the corner that's Airbnb, but he's also got personal property in there with all the beds and the whatever that he's got in his motel. And that's the difference between commercial and then a rental, an apartment building. There's that commercial aspect, but the commercial rate by Wyoming Constitution and residential rate are the same, 9.5%.
Okay.
And that's been the big hoorah and why they're wanting to pull the one away from the other so that they can probably tweak commercial up and residential down.
Mostly to tweak residential down.
Yeah.
We'll see what actually transpires, but and that'll be on the ballot this fall.
Oh, that's what's.
Yeah,
that's what's
amendment
coming
A.
on the ballot.
Amendment A, which right now you can't go beyond two percentage points, isn't it?
Right.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it,
Because there was some legislation that was unconstitutional that went beyond the deal. But there's state regulations, if you wanna pull in the fire marshal, go talk to them and see. Your airport hangars, the fire marshal comes in.
So that has to
Looks
be
at
a
those.
state decision to regulate the safety of
No, you bring that
short-term
in,
rentals, like.
you bring that
If
in,
the
and-
state decides that short-term rentals are commercial, then that's on the state to regulate the safety of those.
right, but you
just
can
like they
take
would
the
do a hotel.
states, you can ask, and I'll use airport hangars for an example, because we're building a boatload of them over in Dixon. And yeah, the FAA regulates them, and that's a whole other world. But also the fire marshal, and we, in planning and zoning, in the county level, require state involvement. We have no authority to enforce any of their regulations, but we want them in our process. So we have the state fire marshal come over. If you're closer than 10 feet, you gotta have firewalls. You gotta have all the other things, say 2 doors, yada, yada. But that's part of our permitting process, is that you have that. You also have to have water, you have to have sewer. And that's a different deal out in the county, because then you would deal with wastewater and DEQ and all of those, but those state regulators would be part of your permit. So you would require the Department of Revenue proof that they're registered as a lodger paying lodging tax. You could even ask for reports annually or something, whatever you want. But you gotta remember that who's going to enforce this in your world?
Right.
You don't wanna be creating a bureaucracy that you don't have people informed. So once they're registered with the Department of Revenue to do lodging tax, that's the Department of Revenue's fault. Problem to make sure they pay lodging tax. Fire marshal can come in and make sure there's
smoke alarms and whatever, if they even do it, I don't know. They're gonna have to ask them.
That's a big
May I
question
say something?
right now.
If you remember when with the attorney, sorry, I want to address this first. I don't ask the attorney. I don't run this meeting.
You act like
She is in control of this meeting. If she would have requested the attorney, I would have asked the attorney to come down. End of story on the attorney. But if you guys remember, when the attorney was here, she said the same thing that everybody else is saying right now. It is so unclear on whose responsibility is whose responsibility that the best thing to do would be to leave it alone for the time being until the legislation gets involved, until the counties get more involved on how we deal with short-term rentals, because nobody has a total plan. The plan that we sent over to her was rejected in numerous ways because of lawsuit liability. And so that is why we chose to table it. Then it got brought up again. Okay, I have asked for plans. I've sent questions over that people have brought up. Johnny sent me some, Matt sent me some, and Nancy sent me some of specific things that we wanted to address. She is looking at those, but we do not have a plan. Before you could even recommend this to the council tonight, what is your plan?
I mean, right, we're not in any place right now to be recommending anything to council.
But I'm saying-
This public hearing was just to get feedback from the community on whether or
Yes.
not there was a strong desire to regulate short-term rentals or not.
There you go.
Madam Chairman, just where you're at right now, and what I'm saying, that's the simple way. You already have provisions for something out of the ordinary in your zoning code. All you need to add to that is you want to make sure that they're getting the playing field a little more level to go with John's world, and that they pay lodging tax. So all you require, you add an addition on there that they register with the Department of Revenue and start paying the lodging tax rate. And I don't know if you want to go in the weeds, I'm not sure. I don't think the fire regulates them. They won't come into your personal home. They do regulate them.
They won't, but if it's deemed a business, you know, and if the fourth class does appear this and it's passed through the voters, then that brings up that question. And the bigger question also is, what is the definition of the short term, the
Less than 30
et
days.
cetera, et cetera, et cetera? That hasn't really been defined for the legislation to start rolling.
And that's your payment.
According to lodging
Less than
tax,
30 days.
it's less than 30 days.
Yeah, what Sue is recommending is just a simple fix for this issue that you guys will then be able to know what is what and where is where. They have to come in, get a permit, show proof that they're paying lodging tax, and that would be the end of it current. You know, that's a simple.
And I think our
Get it right.
current ordinances include that. They just have to be enforced.
How are we going to do that?
That is,
Well, that's the $9,000 question.
but I think
Everything's in the
if
ordinances.
we get to the point.
They have to have permits. Everything's there. It's already there. We know that. Doesn't matter, 1,400, 9,000, 6,000. You have to have a special permit use for the renting of a portion of your single family house.
And that's only in 6,000. That's not listed as.
Go back to 7,200, okay? Then it shoots you back to 18-18.030, accessory uses, home occupancy and pursuant to 1806-1I, which they would have to come back if you're in 7,200. We have everything on the books to have special permit uses for short terms. What is inside of those permits will require depend. We have everything here. Everything is already on the books to have people permitted for short term based on the language here.
And I think nobody can, that is not violating any sort of private property rights, We're not including anything
Private
new.
property.
It already
Non-compliance
exists already
ordinances.
there. I think if we ever wanted to go to the point of creating some sort of permit process that then limited short-term rentals, I'm not saying that we're going to, but if we ever wanted to do that, I think we would need some sort of housing study that gave us actual data. I did a relatively brief look into litigation that's happening around short-term rentals. And it seems most of the time judges are in favor of, or ruling in favor of being able to regulate short-term rentals. But there has to be some sort of reason or goal behind it. And if we ever wanted to get to the point of saying limit to 10% of our housing stock or some sort of density, I think we would need some sort of housing study that says these are gonna be our housing needs for the next 20, 50 years. This is what the housing stock is. This is how much of those houses are taken up with short-term rentals, and that would give us some sort of data to then put additional regulations on if the community felt that was necessary. But as of this point, I think I'll reiterate it again for the last time, they're businesses operating in residential districts, and they should be treated like businesses in accordance to our existing code.
Madam Chair, comment.
Yes.
I agree with Matt, you know, this reminds me of the zoning thing we just talked about. We got violators in the zones because of commercial resident, you know, and residential. That's why the guy wanted to get a zone change. This, we have in the books, but we don't have any documentation of where these are at. You know, that's what personally I feel that we owe it to our residents to have a list of where all these are at, just so we can enforce what's on the books to begin with. Without any of that, you know, we're just like living in the wild. We look at around town, we have places that are, our junk ordinance isn't even in effect. And we gotta start, you know, a process that's gonna help our residents in the event that something comes up. And I don't see a problem with, let's make sure that there's a application that every short-term rental permit has to fill out.
The special permit.
Okay.
Special permit.
Well, then we got on the books, let's get a letter to them stating, you need to get in line with the ordinance. Here's the form.
Yeah.
We gotta have that. I feel we owe it to our residents for them to know and us to know where these are at in the event something comes up. That's what I perceive as, let's go with enforcing what's there, but contact the owners so they know, like there was brought up. People don't even know. Yeah, that's right. We don't know. But we should start getting it to where it's documented. Yeah.
Matt.
I don't like to talk of regulation. We're not gonna regulate anything. Let's not even talk about regulation. I don't like the word, it scares people. What we have is non-compliance of the existing codes. Okay, the first thing we want to do is educate that well-written letter of two people that have short-term rentals. They flatly said, we didn't know about it. Well, we'll get to, it seems like some people don't know about it. We have ordinances where you need a special use permit. Let's do an outreach where, hey, come on in, let's get this, you know, get them registered. We're not gonna regulate anything. We just wanna get you all in compliance so we know how many there is here. You know, I heard about taxes and all that. I really don't care about all that right now. I would just like to everybody get in compliance, so then you have a base data. Because regulations, if you're gonna do it, is based on data, statistics and all that, and what's not going right. Okay, so can we just agree on educating some people, letting them know that you have to have a special use permit based on the existing ordinances that we have for
Maybe,
this.
maybe it's like they get a building code or a building permit, they have to paste it in their front window. It says like short-term rental permit and leave it up to the neighbors. Everyone knows if there's a short-term rental in your neighborhood, and if someone's operating without that permit, then they get reported.
Well, we can't back up. It's like the egg thing, the chicken things, okay? People were raising eggs and all that. And we came up with an ordinance. Okay, we know we got people doing Airbnb here. We know some people that are doing it under the table, fine and dandy. But we gotta start somewhere, you know? And putting a Star of David up No, I'm not doing that.
Jodelle, thoughts?
I think the education of our existing people would be the best start. I don't think we need to call it regulation. We just need to know that you're registered. If we use the term register with the town, they would take it a whole lot easier and probably become compliant than to say, this is the ordinance and you better be following it. Let's just ask them nicely, please come in, register your Airbnb, and we have started somewhere. Let's just do what was already on the book and call it a registration form.
What about the short-term rentals that are operating in zones right now that don't specify, like 7,200, that don't specify bed and breakfast and renting part of your home?
And it tells you to refer back to, I think,
Yep, I'll read it right to you. Any home occupancy which is neither specified permitted under subsection B nor not specified under C may, upon application of the planning commission, be permitted.
Okay. That's already
That
there.
handles 7,200.
So I'm gonna ask you a lawyer question. What a lawyer would ask. What's the definitive difference between? And I can tell you from talking trash, there's people who own houses in this town who do not live here. And they're long-term rentals. What makes that not a business requiring a permit? Yet a short-term rental needs a permit. Is it the lodging tax? You're going to have to define that legally in order to.
I mean, my view is that the state has defined it for us, that if you're less than 30 days, you get charged a lodging tax.
That's the
If you're more than
definition,
30
it's
days,
lodging tax, so you're,
the state doesn't tax long-term rentals.
so you're gonna have to have a definition. What is a short-term rental and what are you basing that on? Because there are businesses that are long-term rentals in this town. That's what they do.
And that's the point, is it's a business regardless whether it's short term or long term, it's still a business.
In a single family dwelling.
Example right here. I've had several people come to my Airbnb, but not several, but I've had at least 3 or 4 people that are nurses at the hospital that needed a place to stay for 3 months. Okay? 3 months they're gonna be here, exceeding that 30-day limit. Then what do? Start shifting back and forth on the taxes I gotta pay on my place?
I mean, that's, yeah,
That's
how,
the owner.
and that's up to the lodging tax board. Like, that's not a rule that we made, that's.
We're talking about also, but I'm also talking about not just that, but I'm also talking about any state taxes, like Sue's saying, you come up.
Right.
Because then is it a business now, or since it's long term, I'm gonna have those people for 3 weeks or 3 months? Are they now
I mean,
long-term renters?
if you are in a hotel, if you like take out a 3-month hotel room rental, say you're working for the refinery or something, the hotel doesn't have to pay lodging tax on that rental for that hotel room. They only pay lodging tax on any rental that's less than 30 days.
I could be wrong on this, but the way I see short-term being different from long-term rentals is in short-term rentals, you have a lot of people coming in and out of your town. They're using, your streets and everything. One of the gentlemen, fellow in the back talked about the traffic. Generally, long-term people there's always examples that are different, but generally, people don't have that many cars around their house, on a regular basis.
So you're saying that somebody that comes and stays short term is gonna be using the street more than somebody that lives here?
Well, the problem with the people that come here short-term is they're using the streets. The long-term people are also adding to your economy, by being regulars with the grocery store and the whole, everything with the car registration.
I'd like to see
whole
that.
But we really don't know, and I think that's one of the problems. I've heard from different people that The difference between a short-term rental and a long-term rental is people can charge a lot more for short-term rentals than they can for long-term rentals. Generally, people turn their houses into short-term rentals when they're looking to really make a lot of, money on their house. To me, that's different than a long-term rental. Obviously, the market determines what a person can charge for short-term rental. And then for me, the way I look at short-term rentals too is this is why I would like to see the information. I'm pretty data-driven. I don't want to see a lot of people coming into Saratoga, taking advantage of what we have and then not contributing back to the town. We want people to stay here and be a part of the town. We don't want to have a lot of transient people in and out. I think that we know that there's a certain market for that. But do we want all of our housing to be owned by out-of-state people and people who don't really contribute to the area? I struggle with that personally. And I also struggle with it from the standpoint that gentleman talks about safety, it changes the dynamic. It has the potential.
Like to comment real quick on that. The gentleman that brought that issue up happens to live across the street from me. Also came over the other day and insulted one of my neighbor's children and called them racial slurs. He's also been served several times with papers from the police department. So I would take what he said with a very big grain of salt, like maybe a salt lick size. He's had complaints about him from everybody else in my neighborhood over there. Everyone.
Well, that's unrelated to short-term rentals. I think the argument that not knowing who your neighbor is not a unique thing to have.
Obviously, I'm not staying in a short-term rental here in Saratoga, but I am a user of short-term rentals. And I disagree that I don't bring anything to the communities that I go to and use short-term rentals. I do, I spend my money there. Yes, I'm driving on their streets, so is the person that's living there for a month or 2 months or 3 months. So I disagree that they're not bringing anything to the community. And I also say anything. Not everyone that uses short-term rentals is garbage.
And I think that was reiterated as balance, finding the balance, right?
Absolutely.
We are a tourism-based economy, but we also need a workforce. And we need to find the balance.
And that's,
figuring
yes,
out.
I agree with all of that, and I'm here just to learn all of the stuff, but when I start hearing comments that people that use Airbnbs don't bring things to the community, people that stay in hotels bring things to the community because they come here and they spend their money. And that's what I do when I go somewhere else and use one. We do have to figure out how to make it all work, but they aren't an all negative thing.
No, I totally agree, and I have an off the wall suggestion. A lot of them are easy to find, and we know who they are. And they probably don't know. Talk to the trash people, I can tell you.
I could also provide some information on that because we did publish an article in the Sun that was talking about the short-term rentals we found. So the issue with Airbnb and Vrbo is they don't list the address of the place unless you book it. So what we did with the process of that article is we would look at the house and the general location and then physically drive there to find the address and then cross-reference that information with the county assessor's website. So
The garbage man.
yeah, so with the article that we posted, I believe that also on the website, we did have like a point in click where you could see where the short-term rentals we found in Saratoga.
And where I'm going is many of them they're out of town or out of state. They do not realize that we have a housing issue here for workforce. And I forget the place that I was reading, somewhere in Colorado, they actually went to their Airbnb owners and said, hey, from May to September, can you open that up for a long term for my 4 employees that's in my hotel business or my restaurant business? And many of them did. at a reduced rate. Because they make so much money anyway. There's one up on the hill I looked at just tonight, and it's $182 a night. 31 days in August. I mean, if they have 4 days open, that's $5,000.
And you couldn't charge rent for that.
No,
A
you
month.
can't charge rent, but I think if they need to be, maybe instead of regulation and we're pushing back and we're drawing lines in the sand, everybody contributes. Karen's right. Every dollar that anyone spends anywhere turns over 7 times. And so maybe we should make these people a part of our community. And we talk to them about certain issues, particularly ones that might have duplexes. Fresh Creek, Obaldi, they put 4, 5, 6. Well, I know my family came for my nephew's wedding. They put 6 people in an Airbnb. You could put 6 workers if they're single in their circumstances. School needs to maybe on their own reach out to people like Chile and say, hey, during the school year, I have a teacher that's only going to be here. And maybe we ought to have some sit down chitty chats with the folks that own these things.
We gotta find them first.
Well, they're easy to find, guarantee you. The one I live.
Paper.
Yeah, they're easy to find.
But who's gonna do it though? There's a cost for that, and do we have that kind of?
There's a cost also,
Money
Nancy,
in our budget.
to enforcing something that you
Absolutely.
don't have any people to go out and enforce.
Absolutely.
You have to bring this into the community. You need to know who they are. If you have neighbors that don't want, if this is a real problem in a neighborhood, that's something you address.
I mean, and that's.
We gotta know who the owners are.
Special
Yeah.
permit
That's all we wanna do.
requires the approval, we'll ask for approval of that.
But you're gonna have to define it. I'm gonna tell you, that's gonna be the first thing
Yeah,
I'm
Emery.
gonna tell you.
I'll get back to the lawyer too, because, I'll go all day.
I'm just.
I'll get back to what the lawyers will stand by, and this is our ordinances, and this is what I'm standing by. Special permit uses, good point, because we say they're renting. Doesn't say the short-term renting or the long-term renting. They're renting. I would say that's both. Of a portion, don't say 10%, 90%, 100%, says a portion, any portion. The single family dwelling, okay, you've got to have a special use permit.
Well, you're there.
So it doesn't matter.
You're on third base.
Long-term or short-term, but why do we have to define it? Because it says right here, the renting.
Okay, you're there then.
I'm there already.
So we're already-
Okay, so can the city send letters out to these people? I think they would,
I mean,
based on
I
this,
think it's
David Giles,
like a-
excuse me, and Susan Marich, can the city send it, get it a rough guesstimate, saying, we understand you're running a day, B&B or whatever, rental and all that, you need a special permit, can you come in and get it or something like that? Educate people, let them know. And then we can get them voluntarily coming in. We're not regulating it. It's just, you need to do it. We need to bring you in compliance. We
It's
just
on the book.
you're not in violation. You're just in non-compliance. Can we get you in compliance?
Run your water.
We need to
bill.
register.
Just register, that's all.
It's easy enough. Yeah, I believe her, and as far as this lawyer and all, you want to go there? Because I'll lawyer up too. Renting, that's long-term or short-term. Thank you very much. Portion, that's in your all.
All right.
Everything's there for us to do our job.
So did every member of the commission get to share thoughts? Is there any other thoughts? And if we have some who dominate.
One more comment is that I know that there's low towns in Wyoming, Du Bois, for example, Sheridan, Park County, we've already have. It's like we don't have to reinvent the wheel, just they already have their rules and regulations or registration, whatever you want to call it, in place. So I'm not sure why we can't just send.
So do we, and we're only asking for a registration. We already got it.
So I think
Got it.
the first
Already
step,
got it.
according, if I'm hearing consensus from the planning commission, is to enforce what already exists. And that is really just requiring a special use permit, creating some sort of list. After that permit, we'll have a list, an address and a contact information,
It gets up started.
and that gets us started.
And on there, you can have their tax number, whatever, revenue number, whatever you want.
And then in the future, should a further permitting process be required or requested, then that is something that we can go into creating a permit process
We cross that when we.
specific to short-term rentals.
And on that too, McCall, if the town, you know, they need to put a notice out to the residents. So maybe the town puts something in the paper stating due to the findings or whatever they wanna word it, that the existing code we have requires this, so if you're one of these individuals, you can keep it all, blah, 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 something of that matter. You need to start there.
So we have to figure out how to contact them. Yes.
I have a quick question. My name is Joan Brown. I'm not understanding the ordinance completely, so what I'm hearing is if it is non-owner occupied residence, we require special use permit, period. Short-term, long-term, it's non-owner occupied.
It's not correct.
That's how I interpret it.
So
And
when you go forward, you're going to address all non-owner occupied residents.
That's my lawyer question.
yeah, and according to the ordinances, that's how it reads to me,
So
is
what-
any rental.
So when you're talking about, we're gonna start with Airbnbs, that's not a concern. It's either we're gonna follow the ordinance, that means all non-owner occupied
This,
residences need to have a special permit. And I just wanted to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying.
That's how they're written.
I'm not seeing that, non-owner.
It's rented, right? That's not owner occupied.
Well, you said you could do a portion, so essentially the owner could be there as well.
Yes. Owner can be there.
And that's technically really where short-term rentals came.
I don't know how you're going to ever manage what you're trying to manage, is kind of my point. You're saying long-term and short-term, but you can't determine what that really means, so you're really focusing on the short-term. I think that's short-sighted and unfair, and I think it's going to leave you open to litigation from owners of short-term rentals. So we either go all, follow the ordinance, which is basically any non-owner occupied portion of any house. I'd like to know the plan to find that
I mean,
information.
and we either do that or the ordinance needs to be changed. Because the way that it's interpreted is, it just says rental, it doesn't specify.
Or we be quiet and let the legislature get some direction, the county get some direction, and then.
No, the county's not
I know.
We got a lot, 8,000 square miles.
You wait, you will be in.
It seems like once something.
County's in on it. Utah County's in on it.
Brought to the planning commission, whether it's a fence that's non-conforming, whether it's a building that's non-conforming, whether it's a street that's non-conforming, once that is brought to the planning commission and said, hey, this is an issue, if the planning commission then ignores it, then I think that is a liability, that's a liability.
Special meetings, you've had meetings.
Right.
And once again, my comment is, if you do not, as a commission, enforce the ordinance, which is any portion of a house that is non-owner occupied, you're opening yourself up for litigation. And that
So,
is
so we either have to,
unacceptable, basically.
we either have to enforce what exists.
Yeah.
Or it needs to be changed. If we feel as a community that it's no longer relevant or out of date. But that is where we are. And I agree that the way it's written, it applies to all rentals. But I don't think we can just be quiet about it because it has been brought to the planning commission as an issue. The community has said, certain community members have said, what's the deal with short-term rentals? They're businesses operating in residential zones. So
Which
some,
goes back to the defining them. If you're gonna regulate them, you're gonna have to define them and regulate them on whatever level you're gonna regulate them. Because
They're defined.
you've got a job and a half, if you're gonna find all the rentals in this town, long-term, short-term, half-term, mid-term, whatever. I mean, who's gonna do that?
My question would be, if we can pass ordinances and stuff regulating these, how is that going to help our housing problem for people like that? How is it going to, what's the result?
So it can be argued either way, that affordable housing is not affected by short-term rentals or is affected by short-term rentals. Regardless of that issue, it's the planning commission's job to uphold the code.
Yeah, I understand that, but you gotta look at it this way too. Most of the jobs in this town are started jobs. And just like the lady that was sitting here said, she has 2 places right now for $1,000 a month. Well, that's the $300 and $400 a month rent are gone. But to take you for instance, what is your highest paid employee?
$60,000 a year.
Really? Well, how about the ones that wait tables and stuff like that?
Our hourly wage is $15, and with tips, they average $30 an hour.
Well, that's pretty good when you're open and everything, but.
Right, when we're open, we wish we could be open more.
Yeah, but they can't afford, $1,000 a month, and that's cheap, that's actually cheap from most of the prices I've heard, like the folks that live catty cornered across the street from me, 2 years ago, they were paying $1,100 a month and paying their own utility. You know, and there's a big balance here that needs to be reached some way.
I think a housing study is required to say whether or not limiting short-term rentals would help with affordable housing. I don't think there's any way we can convince Chuck to.
Why are we talking about limiting anything? Well, I don't understand
That would
this.
address the affordable housing. If you want to tie short-term rentals.
We're just talking about getting people to comply, and we're often here.
Well, this all stems though from affordable housing.
And I
That's
think
where
that-
this all starts from.
We're not being in compliance with our regs
Yeah, but-
stems from okay.
I cannot see how that's gonna make more housing available for low income.
Neither do I, sir.
But
Neither do I. I'm with you. I don't see how it affects affordable housing at all. I just want it to be, people be in compliance with our existing
code.
codes. I don't want more codes. I don't want more compliant. I just want compliance.
okay, I guess we can continue this conversation on so the planning commission would like to figure out a way to enforce the existing code. And how we go about doing that is gonna be up for discussion.
Workshop, look at all these options. You have, you have your guidance right in front of you. Okay, how do you implement it? I've heard many different ways, the newspaper, the post office, however you guys choose to implement it. And with a plan forward, you have home rule. Don't wait for the state to set this because you're not gonna like what the state's gonna say. Because the state has 26 counties that you have to look at. So there's not one size fits everybody. So you need to protect that home rule. But a good workshop and look at all this. And then come up with the best plan to go forward before you initiate it. And maybe it's just a small step, just getting into compliance. And then look at definitions, how you're gonna determine that, And then, take small bites at it.
I think the workshop is in July of 2023 on this.
Yeah.
We're over a year on this. And we're
Okay,
like where we're at now.
Well, now we did put it to bed for a couple of months.
But they only grew those.
yeah, it was recess. Okay, one last comment, Chia, and I agree, workshop is, I think, our good next step.
So in terms of enforcement and who's gonna do this, so there were ideas at this Western Planner thing where there's actually the sheriff and they deputized volunteers to go out and enforce. Now you couldn't wear a gun or anything like that, but you have the authority with your little.
Okay, so in addition to this public hearing, we had the idea of putting out a survey to the community to get further feedback on how people have been affected by short-term rentals and opinions.
And honestly, at this point after this,
Do you want to email us that survey and we can review it and
Yeah.
talk about it at our workshop?
Do that. I do want to throw this out though, like after this, we are getting the same, like 5 things over and over again. We need to know how many there are. We need them for tourism. We need congruent communities that aren't transient. They're taking our ability to find workers. They're a business. They need to pay the same taxes and we don't want to get sued. That is the 6 issues that come up every single time. So if we do follow the survey at this point, I think we could say we're gonna get those same 6 things.
I would agree. I have the same thing, I have exactly the same thing wrote down, and it's what we talk about every time.
And I'm more than happy to kick the survey out. I just know it's gonna increase the timeline, like however long you guys wanna run that for.
It could be interesting also to get personal feedback on, do you have a long-term rental that you got kicked out of because it got converted to short-term rentals? Like how many people in our workforce has that happened to? Is it 1%? 10%?
I think
Like some statistics like that could be interesting.
you need
The
to,
reverse of that.
Or the reverse of
We got
that.
offered, when we were gonna come in, we got offered that they were gonna dump their Airbnb and let us rent it for like 6 months.
That would be awesome.
Winter. So it was like $1,700 a month, and then I could go into the trailer park for $1,000. I'm gonna get a trailer park, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I think next step would be a workshop at the very least to figure out how we're gonna enforce the existing code.
Might I add something, Madam Chair?
I don't have anything to do with enforcing code.
That you need to know, how many are there really? Everything's anecdotal,
We're doing,
right?
that's where we're going.
Where are they?
Exactly.
Paper got it.
Are there
We can get it.
concentrations? Yes, right. That's a good start. Caitlin's got a good start. And then I really truly think that a lot of them don't know they're a problem in some of us' mind.
Well, they're just a violation of our ordinances.
Yeah, they may not know. they're
Yes,
not in
but I
compliance.
don't think you wanna go there because
Enforce the code.
You don't wanna enforce this?
not to the letter of the law, because are you willing, now you're. I'll go with my next again. Willing to go out and find all of the rentals.
I'm not. I'm a volunteer on this
No,
planning and
but
zoning commission.
I'm using
It's the
you.
city.
That guy has like 4 jobs.
I'm out.
And a couple of them are bigger than chasing rentals around, but what?
No kidding.
Joan is right. If you go by the letter of that law, that means that you're gonna have to find out everybody in this town that's renting property.
Well,
Oh, it's you.
No problem.
And some of them are.
Saying.
I can tell you right now off the top of my head, I have one trash customer, has 4 trailer houses, 2 duplexes, 2 houses.
we'll come to you.
And that, and he's short-term, he's long-term, he's mix and match. You're gonna make him permit, and then he's gonna change or he's gonna sell. And how are you gonna do
Yeah,
this?
we know Sue, but we gotta start someplace. I mean, we gotta do.
And that's where I go back to my, who are you after? Who do you want? You're talking short-term rentals, so then you define, okay, this is what a short-term rental is. College lodging thing, because otherwise you're gonna get them all and who's gonna do that?
I
Guaranteed.
agree. 100%. I'm just telling you, as a volunteer on this commission, what our ordinances say, it's saying that any rental needs a special use permit. Who's gonna enforce that? Take that to the mayor and take that to our public works.
also-
Don't ask me.
Ordinances and all this stuff that we live and die with in government are living documents. They can be
Correct.
amended and
Correct.
corrected or ignored and whatever, which you got a lot of things. RD 7200 is not supposed to have pole barns in it too. By gollies, they're all over in RD.
Who's enforcing that? Why haven't they?
Nobody. And that's my point, and that's what Joan is
We talked
saying.
about
No
that.
one is going to do it
Exactly.
unless
So
you.
what is the point of
Where
it
are
all?
you starting?
Well, it's fine.
Start someplace.
Define what you
Okay.
want.
I think that, may I ask a question? All right, one last question.
From what
I
you
feel your frustration.
learned at the conference,
Do most of the towns hire someone to do that type of work? Is that what you found?
Regulating, you mean?
Or volunteers, there's a whole volunteer
Or,
thing.
but there is someone specific that's hired to do that though. So
A lot
I
of
mean,
towns
I
have
think
code
it's.
enforcement departments that are
exactly.
staffed, sometimes you have, depending on your population, you'll have 1 to 4 guys.
Code enforcement, and that's the cost.
I mean, I don't see you doing this personally, I think you would have to hire.
It's highly unlikely.
Oh, I'll guarantee you, it's not gonna happen. That part I can guarantee, he will not be doing it.
Absolutely.
But in your work. You can define what. The small bite to start with. Make a definition of what you want. Just to look at, just like this thing. You want it short term. 30 days or less. That's your first, and make that recommendation to your town council. So they know exactly what the parameters are that you're suggesting. And then continue to look at the ordinance if you want to go to the long term, something like that, but identify what your focus point is. And start there. You may have to put that definition into the ordinance.
Okay,
I have one question for all the board. What is the main objective? From what I can gather, it's registration and following the court ordinance. Okay, leave the ordinance out for just a minute, but the biggest thing is a registration. Am I correct? That's kind of what I gather listening to here.
That's it.
Is the number one goal. The ordinance can be changed, as Sue said, real simple. That leaves out all the other rentals. So basically, the board is after one thing. How many there are and where they're at. Okay, that's the start. Then you can add to this as you go. I mean, I wrote this down kind of the way you talked about it, even McCall. But to me, that would be where you start. Is take a look at the ordinance and kind of push it aside and work on a change for that. So it takes out all rentals, because I tell you what, if you're gonna open up that can of worms, I'll guarantee the council will say no. I'll guarantee that.
well, one thing, the council can't say no because it's existing.
Yes, we can. We can amend that ordinance immediately. They can say no.
Okay, then, okay, so you can amend. the
I mean,
ordinance,
we
but you
can
can't
go
just say
right
no.
into,
Either
we'll go
something
right
has to be
into it.
changed, or what exists has to be enforced.
Yes. But that's where it would go. If you include every rental in town, I mean, that's almost ridiculous.
It is. It is.
That's
No,
not
I-
even, that's not even
It's honest language.
It's land use. There's businesses operating in residential districts, and that needs to be done according to our code. And so how we do that is up for discussion.
But-
So I think what we're going to do is we're going to make a workshop, and we're gonna discuss the small bites, because I agree, this is a big problem. Every town in the country is dealing with it. This is not easy. It's not done overnight. We need to do small bites. So we're going to make a workshop. We're gonna figure out what those small bites are and figure out our next steps moving forward. Emery is going to send us the survey questions that he came up with. We can look at those and see if we think that will add anything new to this discussion, or if it will just reiterate all the things that we've already heard. And that is something we can either talk about at our workshop or at our next meeting. I don't think we have the capacity tonight to discuss those questions specifically.
And then I'll send out a Calendly for your workshop dates.
Okay.
Pull you guys.
We'll figure out a workshop date. I'm gonna go ahead and table reviewing the Title 17 draft that we've been working on. So I don't think we have the capacity for that this evening either. Is there anything pertinent from building permit report?
Not really. I mean, it's kind of the same pattern as last year. Housing, we're like 11 units right now, so it's on the books. That's one fourplex. And then it's included in there, so we've got 52 permits so far. So I have to.
You have a fourplex.
No, I would really like to see.
diversify our housing stock.
No, yeah, and that's something I think we need to look at in the long, is how do we, like in 7200 and stuff, are there opportunities to allow other-
She and I listened to a lot of stuff about adjusting your code in order to help housing diversity. And I think that is something that we would love to talk about further
Right,
when we get to Title 18 and doing.
I agree.
And
Right, because you really look at like the past building permits, when you added a lot of housing stock, it's when duplexes, fourplexes, condos, like when those little higher density, not big, not 16 units, not 20 units, but a duplex here, 4 unit here, 2 units here, like the amount of housing units that get added annually really increases. So making sure there's.
and for a small community, 20 new units would be like very life changing.
Right, and those are density additions that don't really change the character, like a duplex is not super invasive, right? But anyway, that's.
Okay, so that's for a future discussion when we get to Title 18.
Madam Chair, do we need to make a motion for the home, for the workshop?
No, oh, to make a workshop?
Well, that we're gonna create a workshop?
I don't know, do we need a motion for that?
Just be a special meeting.
Maybe I'll just do it.
Call a special meeting.
Special meeting.
Did you guys make an official meeting or a recommendation to approve the stamp plan? You guys actually vote on that? Did you? Okay.
I know, there's been so much fun.
Exciting.
So exciting. Okay. Unless there's any other final comments, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Entertain a motion.
All 16.
One. Tia's motion.
And that's.
Matt second, all in favor?
All right.
Aye, opposed.